My name is Ashley Wilson and I'm 22 years old. Last month, I graduated with honors from Northwestern University as a first-generation college student. I worked 3 jobs to make it through school, and on what should have been the proudest day of my life, I stood alone in my cap and gown, scanning the crowd for parents who never showed. Instead, my phone buzzed with a text. A selfie of my mom and dad at a Super Bowl party, beer and nachos in hand. Before I tell you how my heart shattered that day, let me know where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever felt invisible to the people who should care the most. I grew up in a small town in Michigan, where everyone knew everyone else's business. My parents, Brenda and Tyler Wilson, were firmly middle class. Dad worked as a sales manager at a local car dealership, and Mom was an administrative assistant at an insurance company. From the outside, we probably looked like a normal, happy family, but appearances can be deceiving. For as long as I can remember, my dad has been obsessed with sports: football, basketball, baseball, hockey, you name it, he watched it. Weekends in our house revolved around game schedules and fantasy leagues. My mom, meanwhile, became increasingly preoccupied with her social media presence, carefully curating images of our perfect family life while the real thing crumbled around us. The pattern started early. When I was 7, I had my first piano recital. I practiced for weeks, perfecting Twinkle Twinkle Little Star with my small fingers. I sat on that stage scanning the audience, but their seats remained empty. Later, I learned Dad had tickets to a Tigers game. You understand, right? Mom said, patting my head. You're the mature one. That phrase became the soundtrack of my childhood. I was the mature one when they missed my soccer championships, my academic awards ceremonies, my debate team finals. I learned not to cry about it, at least not where they could see me. Instead, I channeled my disappointment into determination. By age 12, I was cooking my own meals and doing my own laundry. By 14, I was setting my own curfews and helping myself with homework. My parents were physically present in the house but emotionally absent from my life. I became fiercely independent, not by choice but by necessity. School became my refuge. I threw myself into academics, staying late to use the library computer since we didn't have one at home. My English teacher, Mrs. Taylor, noticed my potential and took me under her wing. She'd slip me extra books, give me feedback on essays that weren't even assigned, and sometimes just listen when I needed to talk. You're going places, Ashley, she'd tell me. Don't let anything hold you back. When my Northwestern acceptance letter arrived during senior year of high school, I screamed with excitement. Mrs. Taylor cried when I told her. My parents? Dad glanced up from the basketball game and said, "That's gonna be expensive." Mom took a picture of me holding the letter for Instagram, captioned it #ProudMom, then went back to scrolling through her phone. They made it clear from the beginning that they wouldn't help financially. "We just don't have it, honey," Mom said, though they somehow found money for Dad's season tickets and Mom's shopping sprees. I didn't argue. By then, I was used to fending for myself. Northwestern was challenging in ways I couldn't have imagined. I worked 3 jobs: barista in the morning, library assistant in the afternoon, and tutoring on weekends, while maintaining a 3.8 GPA. I lived on ramen and coffee, pulled all-nighters, and worried constantly about money. But I also found myself. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who valued knowledge, ambition, and growth. I made real friends there. Melanie, my roommate sophomore year, came from a big, loud Italian family who FaceTimed her every Sunday without fail. She couldn't understand why my parents rarely called. That's just how they are, I'd say, trying to sound nonchalant while something inside me ached. Jason, who sat next to me in Econ 301, had parents who sent care packages monthly. He always shared his mom's homemade cookies with me. Despite the growing emotional distance, I never stopped hoping for my parents' approval. Each semester, I'd email them my grades, each time with a perfect GPA. Mom would respond with a thumbs-up emoji. Dad usually didn't respond at all. When I landed on the dean's list 3 semesters in a row, I called to tell them. "That's nice, honey," Mom said, before launching into a story about the neighbor's new car. There were moments that cut deeper than others. During sophomore year, I got pneumonia and ended up in the hospital for 3 days. When I called home, barely able to speak through my congestion, Dad was annoyed I'd interrupted the playoffs. Just take some medicine and get some rest, he said before hanging up. It was Melanie who brought me soup and sat by my bed reading aloud from our textbook so I wouldn't fall behind. Junior year, I was selected for a prestigious marketing internship in Chicago. I called home hoping they'd be proud. That's great, Mom said. But did you see the photos I posted of our new kitchen remodel? 47 likes already. I felt invisible in my own life story. By senior year, I'd accepted that our relationship would always be one-sided, but some childish part of me still craved their validation. When graduation approached, I thought, this is it. This is the milestone they can't ignore. After all, I'd done what neither of them had, earned a college degree, and from a prestigious university at that. Surely this would be the achievement that finally made them see me. I sent them a formal invitation 3 months in advance. I called to make sure they'd received it. Of course we'll be there. Sweetie, Mom assured me. We wouldn't miss it for the world. For once I believed them. The morning of my graduation dawned bright and clear. One of those perfect Chicago spring days that make you believe anything is possible. I woke up early, too excited to sleep, and spent extra time getting ready. I carefully ironed my dress, fixed my hair, and practiced my smile in the mirror. Today was the culmination of 4 years of backbreaking work, of juggling jobs and classes, of proving to myself and everyone else that I could do this. I tried calling my parents around 9 a.m. to confirm when they'd arrive. No answer. I texted, "Can't wait to see you today. Ceremony starts at 1, but find me by the library at noon for photos." No response. I told myself they were probably driving, focused on the road. They'd promised they would come, and this time surely they would keep that promise. The campus buzzed with excitement. Everywhere I looked, families hugged graduates, took photos, beamed with pride. Fathers straightened their sons' ties. Mothers wiped away tears. Grandparents arrived with flowers and gift bags. The air felt electric with joy and possibility. I kept checking my phone as the clock ticked toward noon. Still nothing. They're just running late, I assured myself, trying to squash the familiar feeling of dread building in my stomach. Traffic from Michigan can be unpredictable. By 12:30 I knew. I just knew. But I kept hoping, even as I lined up with my fellow graduates, even as we marched into the auditorium to pomp and circumstance, even as I scanned the audience one last time before taking my seat, I spotted Melanie's parents, who waved enthusiastically and gave me a thumbs up. Jason's family had saved me a program, but the two people I most wanted to see weren't there. Our university president spoke about resilience and the future. Under different circumstances, his words might have inspired me. Instead, they washed over me as I sat numb, the empty feeling in my chest expanding with each passing minute. When they called my name to walk across the stage, I plastered on a smile. Ashley Wilson, Bachelor of Science in Marketing, summa cum laude, the dean announced. A smattering of applause, Melanie's family, Jason's parents, but not the voices I had hoped to hear. After the ceremony, as families gathered for photos and celebration, I stood alone, clutching my diploma. That's when my phone finally buzzed. A text from Mom. A selfie of her and Dad in Patriots jerseys, surrounded by people in a living room decorated with Super Bowl banners and snack tables. "Sorry we couldn't make it, honey. Last-minute invitation to Dave's Super Bowl party. Too good to pass up. Dave is your dad's boss, you know how important these connections are. Congrats on graduating. So proud of our college girl." I stared at the phone, unable to process what I was seeing. They had missed my graduation, the most important day of my life, an event planned months in advance, for a last-minute Super Bowl party? I felt physically ill, like someone had punched me in the stomach. The casual congrats, tacked on as an afterthought, felt worse than no acknowledgement at all. I stumbled to the nearest bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and finally let the tears come. 4 years of stress, struggle, and sacrifice, and they couldn't give me one day, not even a few hours. In that moment, something inside me broke. The child who had been desperately seeking approval, validation, even just basic acknowledgement, finally accepted the truth. I would never be a priority in their lives. I don't know how long I sat there crying. Eventually, Melanie found me. She didn't say anything at first, just sat on the floor beside me in her graduation gown, holding my hand. Jason arrived minutes later with a bottle of water. They didn't come, I finally managed to say. I know, Melanie said softly. I'm so sorry, Ash. They went to a Super Bowl party instead. The words sounded ridiculous even as I said them. Jason shook his head in disbelief. That's messed up. Melanie's parents wanted to take us all out to dinner, but I couldn't bear the thought of sitting through a celebratory meal feeling like this. I made an excuse and went back to my apartment alone. I sat on my bed still wearing my cap and gown, staring at the wall for hours. The sadness eventually gave way to a strange emptiness, then to anger, and finally to a calm acceptance that felt like the most painful emotion of all. I had spent my entire life making excuses for them, filling in the gaps of their affection with my own desperate hope. But looking at that text message so casual, so thoughtless, I finally saw the relationship for what it was. They weren't bad people exactly. They just didn't have the capacity to put anyone else's needs before their own. Not even their only daughter on her graduation day. That night I didn't respond to their text. For the first time I couldn't think of anything to say that would paper over the hurt. Instead, I took off my cap and gown, carefully folded them and put them away. Then I took a shower, washing away my tears along with the remnants of what should have been a perfect day. 3 days after graduation, I was sorting through job applications in my apartment when my phone rang. My parents' number flashed on the screen. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. Ashley, how's our college graduate? Mom chirped, her voice bright and cheerful as if nothing had happened. Fine, I said, my own voice flat. I waited for an apology, an acknowledgement, something, but it didn't come. So how's the job hunt going? Any big companies snatching you up yet? Dad asked, joining the conversation. No mention of missing my graduation. No recognition of how their absence might have affected me. Just business as usual. I have a few promising leads, I replied mechanically, feeling an uncomfortable tightness in my chest. That's great, honey, Mom said. Listen, we're calling because we've been thinking about making an investment in our future. Well, the family's future, really. I stayed silent, wondering where this was heading. We found this beautiful RV, Dad continued, enthusiasm bubbling in his voice. A 2023 Winnebago. Top of the line, great condition, amazing deal. We could travel the country, see the national parks, maybe even come visit you in Chicago. Okay, I said cautiously. The thing is, Mom jumped in, we need a little help with the down payment. Just $5,000. We've got the rest covered. The room seemed to tilt. $5,000? I repeated, certain I'd misheard. Yes, but it's not just for us, Dad clarified quickly. It's a family investment. We'll take you on trips sometimes. Think of all the great memories we could make. My heart raced as the audacity of their request sank in. $5,000. More money than I had to my name after 4 years of struggling to pay tuition, rent, and basic living expenses. $5,000 from the daughter whose graduation they just skipped for a football party. I don't have that kind of money, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But you're about to start a big career job, Mom insisted. And your credit is probably better than ours. You could take out a small loan. After all we've done for you, this would be a way to give back to the family. After all they'd done for me? My mind raced through the past 4 years. The nights I'd worked until 2 a.m. to pay for textbooks, the meals I'd skipped to save money, the medical issues I'd ignored because I couldn't afford insurance. All while they'd renovated their kitchen, bought new cars, attended every sports event they wanted. Ashley, are you still there? Dad's impatient voice cut through my thoughts. Yes, I managed, feeling nauseated. I just need to think about it. What's there to think about? He pressed. This is a limited time offer on the RV. We need to move quickly. In that moment, something crystallized in my mind. This wasn't an unusual request. It was simply the most extreme version of a pattern that had existed my entire life. They took, I gave. They needed, I provided. They prioritized their wants. I sacrificed my needs. I really can't talk about this right now, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. I have a job interview to prepare for. I'll call you back. I hung up before they could protest and sat frozen, phone still clutched in my hand. The audacity was breathtaking. Not just the request itself, but the timing of it, mere days after they delivered one of the most painful disappointments of my life. And not a single word of apology or acknowledgement about missing my graduation. My hands shaking, I called Melanie. "They want what?" she practically shouted when I told her. "After they didn't even show up to your graduation? Are they serious?" "Completely serious," I confirmed, pacing my small apartment. "They acted like it was the most natural request in the world." "Ashley, that's not normal," Melanie said carefully. "You know that, right?" Did I know that? I'd spent so long normalizing their behavior, making excuses, telling myself that all families had their issues. But hearing the situation through Melanie's horrified reaction made it impossible to minimize anymore. "I think I'm finally seeing them clearly," I admitted, my voice breaking. "And I don't like what I see." That night I barely slept. I tossed and turned, replaying not just the phone call but countless moments from my childhood and young adulthood. The soccer games where I'd scored goals for parents who weren't in the stands. The school projects I'd completed without help while classmates' parents built volcanoes and solar systems. The college application process I'd navigated alone. The tuition payments I'd somehow managed on my own. I'd been so desperate for their approval that I'd accepted crumbs of attention and convinced myself it was a feast. I'd interpreted basic politeness as love. I'd mistaken their occasional presence for true support. As dawn broke, I lay awake, eyes burning from lack of sleep, and faced the truth I'd been running from for years. My parents didn't just fail to prioritize me, they actively prioritized everything else above me. And now, they wanted me to fund their recreational vehicle, while I was drowning in student debt and trying to start my life. The revelation didn't bring peace. It brought pain, raw and searing. But somewhere beneath the pain was something else, something unfamiliar but necessary. The first flickering of genuine anger. Not the muted disappointment I usually allowed myself to feel, but real, justified anger. For the first time, I wondered if I deserved better. The week following my parents' money request passed in a blur of emotional turmoil. I had 3 job interviews scheduled, opportunities I worked hard to secure, but I could barely focus on preparing for them. My mind kept returning to that phone call, to the casual way they'd asked for $5,000 without a single mention of missing my graduation. My phone buzzed constantly with texts from them. "Have you thought about the RV yet? The dealership needs an answer by Friday. This is a limited-time offer, Ashley. We could really use your help on this." Each message tightened the knot in my stomach. I responded with noncommittal delays, still thinking, in the middle of interviews, "We'll get back to you soon." Every evasion bought me time but increased my anxiety. On Wednesday, I met Jason for coffee. We'd both been interviewing with marketing firms in Chicago, and we planned to compare notes on potential employers. Instead, I found myself pouring out the whole story. "My parents were like that too," he said after listening intently. "Not exactly the same, but similar patterns. They'd promise things, then disappoint me, then act like I was unreasonable for being upset." "How did you handle it?" I asked, desperate for guidance. "Not well at first," he admitted. "I kept trying to earn their approval, thinking if I just achieved enough they'd finally see me. It took therapy for me to realize that their behavior wasn't about me at all. It was about their own limitations." Therapy. The word hung between us. I'd never considered it before, had always prided myself on handling my problems independently. But wasn't that just another pattern I'd developed in response to their neglect? That night, I did something I'd never done before. I researched emotional neglect online. Article after article described experiences that mirrored my own. Children who became hyper-independent because they couldn't rely on their parents. Adults who struggled with self-worth because they'd never received consistent validation. The persistent feeling of being unseen, unheard, and unimportant in your own family. I read until my eyes burned, recognizing myself in nearly every description. One line in particular stood out. Children of emotionally neglectful parents often become high achievers as a way to gain the attention and approval they crave, yet no achievement ever seems to fill the void. The truth of those words hit me like a physical blow. Wasn't that exactly what I'd been doing? Achieving, striving, exceeding every expectation, all in the desperate hope that my parents would finally see me, value me, prioritize me. The next day, instead of preparing for my final interview, I made an appointment with a therapist. Dr. Samantha Hayes had experience with family trauma and could see me the following week. It felt like both a surrender and a victory. Meanwhile, my parents' messages grew increasingly impatient. Ashley, we need an answer on the RV situation. The dealership won't hold it much longer. We're trying to plan our summer. We need to know if you're helping or not. After everything we've done for you, this feels like a small ask. That last message sent a surge of anger through me. Everything they'd done for me? What exactly had they done besides provide the bare minimum of shelter and food during my childhood, things they were legally obligated to provide? Had they supported my education? No. Had they offered emotional guidance? No. Had they even shown up for the most important milestone of my young life? No. I drafted angry responses, deleted them, drafted more measured ones, deleted those too. No matter how I phrased it, I couldn't find the right words to express the complex tangle of emotions I was feeling. By the weekend, the stress was manifesting physically. I developed a persistent headache. My stomach churned constantly. I couldn't sleep for more than a few hours at a time. Even basic tasks required enormous effort, as if I were moving through molasses. Melanie noticed immediately when she came over on Saturday. "You look terrible," she said bluntly, setting down the lunch she'd brought. "Have you been sleeping at all?" "Not really," I admitted. "I keep thinking about what to do about my parents." "You know you don't owe them $5,000, right?" she said, unpacking containers of soup and sandwiches. "That's completely unreasonable. Especially after they couldn't even be bothered to attend your graduation." "Logically, I know that," I said, accepting the soup gratefully. "But there's this voice in my head saying I should help them because they're family. And another voice saying I'm being selfish if I don't. And yet another voice pointing out that I've always been the responsible one, always picking up their slack." "Those aren't your voices," Melanie said firmly. "Those are their voices that you've internalized. The guilt trips they've been laying on you your entire life." She was right, and somewhere deep down I knew it. But breaking free of those internalized voices would prove to be one of the hardest challenges I'd ever faced. Harder than working 3 jobs while maintaining a perfect GPA. Harder than navigating college without parental support. Because despite everything, despite the neglect and disappointment and outright betrayal, some stubborn part of me still longed for their approval. Still hoped that somehow someday they would transform into the parents I'd always needed them to be. 2 weeks after graduation, I received an email that changed everything. A job offer from Miranda Marketing Group in Chicago. The salary was better than I dared hope for, the benefits comprehensive, and the role aligned perfectly with my career goals. For the first time since graduation day, I felt a surge of genuine joy. My first instinct was to call my parents, a reflex born from years of seeking their validation. I actually had my phone in hand, their number on the screen before I stopped myself. What was I expecting? Enthusiasm? Pride? More likely, they'd acknowledge the news for 30 seconds before steering the conversation back to the RV. Instead, I called Melanie, who screamed with excitement, and Jason, who insisted on taking me out for celebratory drinks. Their genuine happiness for my success filled me with warmth. This, I realized, was what support actually felt like. The job offer did more than provide financial security. It shifted something fundamental in my relationship with my parents. For years, they'd held the implicit power that parents have over children, even adult children. But now, with financial independence within reach, that power dynamic was changing. I was no longer the struggling student who might someday need to move back home. I was a professional with options. That realization gave me the courage to do what I'd been avoiding. Have a direct conversation with my parents about the money request and everything it represented. But first, I wanted to be prepared. At my first therapy session with Dr. Hayes, I explained the situation and asked for guidance. "What do you want to say to them?" she asked. "That I can't give them the money," I said immediately. "That I'm just starting my career and paying off student loans. That it's not fair of them to ask, especially after missing my graduation." "Those are all valid points," she nodded. "But I'm curious. Is there something deeper you want to express?" I thought about it for a long moment. I want them to understand how much they've hurt me, I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. Not just with the graduation or the money request, but the pattern of making me feel unimportant. Invisible. Dr. Hayes helped me prepare for the conversation, teaching me phrases to use when setting boundaries and techniques to stay calm if they became defensive. We role-played different scenarios, with her playing my parents and me practicing my responses. The night before the planned call, Melanie came over to offer moral support. "Remember," she said as we sat on my couch drinking tea, "their reaction isn't your responsibility. You can only control what you say and how you respond, not how they receive it." "What if they get angry?" I asked, voicing my deepest fear. "What if they cut me off completely?" "Then they'll be showing you exactly who they are," she said gently. "And as painful as that would be, at least you'd know." The next morning, with my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, I called them. Mom answered, her voice cheerful. "Ashley, we were just talking about you. Any news on the RV? No, how are you?" No questions about my job search or my life. Straight to the RV. Something hardened in my resolve. "Actually, Mom, that's why I'm calling. I've made a decision about the money." "Oh, good." She sounded relieved. "Your father's right here, let me put you on speakerphone." "Hey there, college graduate." Dad's voice boomed through the phone. "Ready to help us with our summer adventures?" I took a deep breath, remembering Dr. Hayes' advice to speak clearly and directly. "I've thought a lot about your request," I began, "and I'm not able to give you $5,000 for an RV." There was a pause, then Mom's voice suddenly chilly. "What do you mean you're not able to?" "I mean I'm not going to do it," I clarified. "I'm just starting my career. I have student loans to pay off. And frankly, I don't think it's appropriate for you to ask for that kind of money from me, especially right now." "Appropriate?" Dad's voice rose. "What's not appropriate about parents asking their daughter for help? That's what families do. They help each other." "Yes, they do," I agreed, feeling surprisingly calm. "But help should go both ways. I've been supporting myself through college for 4 years with no help from either of you. And then, when you couldn't even show up for my graduation because you preferred a Super Bowl party, you asked me for thousands of dollars days later. That doesn't feel like a family that helps each other." There it was, the first time I directly addressed their absence at my graduation. The phone went silent for a moment. "So that's what this is about," Mom finally said, her voice tight. "You're punishing us for missing one event." "One event?" I repeated, disbelief flooding through me. My college graduation wasn't just one event. It was the culmination of 4 years of hard work. 4 years of juggling multiple jobs while maintaining a perfect GPA. It was the most important day of my life so far. And you chose a last-minute Super Bowl party instead. "Now wait just a minute." Dad interrupted. "That wasn't just any party. That was at my boss's house. Those connections are important for my career." "More important than your daughter's graduation?" asked. My voice steady despite the emotion building in my chest. "You don't understand how the real world works with that fancy education of yours," Dad snapped. "Sometimes you have to make tough choices." "I understand tough choices better than you think," I replied. "I've been making them every day for 4 years while you've been acting like my education was some hobby I was pursuing, not the foundation of my entire future." "I can't believe how selfish you're being," Mom chimed in, her voice thick with tears. "After everything we've done for you, now that you're successful, you're just going to abandon us? Is that the kind of daughter we raised?" Their tactics were so transparent now, the guilt, the manipulation, the victimhood. For the first time, I could see them clearly without the fog of desperate hope clouding my vision. "I'm not abandoning anyone," I said firmly. "I'm setting a boundary. I won't be giving you money for an RV. And I need you to respect that decision." "Well, if that's how you feel," Dad's voice had gone cold, "maybe we should give you some time to think about your priorities. Family should come first. Ashley, if you can't understand that, maybe we need some distance until you figure it out." It was the threat I'd feared, cutting contact, but now that it had arrived, I felt oddly calm. "If that's your choice, I respect it," I said. "I hope someday we can have a healthier relationship, but that would require both sides to make changes. After a few more tense exchanges, the call ended. I sat motionless on my bed, phone still in hand, expecting to feel devastated. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Panic? Yes, but beneath it, a curious sense of relief. Like I'd been carrying a heavy backpack for miles and had finally set it down. The panic won out initially. My breathing became shallow, my heart raced, and I felt lightheaded. Classic panic attack symptoms, I realized dimly. I focused on breathing deeply, counting each inhale and exhale until the worst of it passed. Then I called Melanie, who came over immediately. She held me while I cried. Not for the relationship I just damaged, but for the relationship I'd never actually had. The parents I'd always longed for but never truly known. That evening, the text started not from my parents but from aunts, uncles, cousins. Apparently, Mom and Dad had wasted no time in spinning their version of events to the extended family. How could you refuse to help your parents? Family supports each other, Ashley. Your parents gave you everything, and this is how you repay them? Each message felt like a fresh wound, but also confirmed that I'd made the right decision. This coordinated guilt campaign revealed just how manipulative their family system was. I turned off my phone, unable to handle any more emotional assault. The next morning, I woke with swollen eyes but a lighter heart. For the first time in my life, I had spoken my truth to my parents without minimizing my feelings or making excuses for their behavior. The cost had been high, possibly our entire relationship, but the alternative was continuing a pattern that had caused me pain my entire life. As I made coffee, I noticed the small framed photo of my parents on my nightstand, the only personal item I displayed in my apartment. Without hesitation, I picked it up, removed the photo, and placed it in a drawer. The empty frame felt like a symbol. A space once filled with an illusion, now cleared for something more authentic. 1 month after the confrontation with my parents, I moved into my new apartment in downtown Chicago, closer to Miranda Marketing Group's offices. The place was tiny but modern, with large windows that flooded the space with light. Most importantly, it was mine. A space untouched by family drama or painful memories. The act of moving felt symbolic, a physical manifestation of the emotional distance I was creating. As I unpacked my meager belongings, I realized how little I'd accumulated over the years. Always anticipating the next move, the next challenge, I'd never allowed myself to put down roots or acquire things that brought me joy simply for their own sake. This place needs some personality, Melanie declared as she helped me arrange my few possessions. It's too utilitarian. She was right. My apartment reflected my approach to life, thus far: functional, minimal, focused on survival rather than enjoyment. That weekend, we visited thrift stores and budget home decor shops. For the first time, I bought things simply because they made me happy. Colorful throw pillows, framed art prints, plants to bring life to the sterile space. Each purchase felt like a small act of rebellion against my upbringing, where practicality always trumped pleasure, where wanting things for yourself was considered selfish. I was learning slowly that taking care of myself wasn't selfish, it was necessary. I began therapy in earnest with Dr. Hayes, committing to weekly sessions. The work was hard, often painful, as we excavated years of emotional neglect and examined the coping mechanisms I'd developed. I learned that my hyperindependence, perfectionism, and constant need for achievement were all responses to childhood wounds, attempts to earn the love and attention that should have been freely given. When a child's emotional needs aren't met, Hayes explained, they don't stop needing, they just stop asking. They learn to deny their own needs, to become self-sufficient to an unhealthy degree. That described me perfectly. I'd stopped asking for help, stopped expecting support, stopped believing I deserved care. Instead, I'd become my own parent, my own cheerleader, my own support system. While that resilience had served me well in some ways, it had also prevented me from forming truly intimate connections. During this period of intensive self-work, my parents maintained their silence. No calls, no texts, no emails. The extended family's messages had tapered off too. Once it became clear I wouldn't engage with their guilt tactics. The absence of contact hurt, but less than I'd expected. In fact, there was a strange peace in not constantly managing their expectations or bracing for disappointment. Work became my anchor. I threw myself into my new role at Miranda, grateful for the structure and purpose it provided. My boss, Stephanie Miranda, was everything I could have hoped for: brilliant, demanding but fair, generous with both criticism and praise. She recognized my potential immediately and began giving me challenging assignments that stretched my capabilities. "You have a natural talent for this," she told me after I presented a comprehensive marketing strategy for a new client. "But more importantly, you have grit. That's something I can't teach." Her words filled me with a warm glow that I realized, with some surprise, was pride. Not the desperate pride of seeking external validation, but genuine satisfaction in my own abilities. The first holiday season alone was harder. As Thanksgiving approached, I felt the weight of family expectations even from a distance. Everyone at work discussed their holiday plans, flights home, family recipes, traditions. When they asked about mine, I gave vague answers, unwilling to explain the complicated reality. Melanie invited me to join her family's Thanksgiving, an offer I accepted with both gratitude and trepidation. Would I feel like an intruder in their warm family dynamic? Would watching their loving interactions only highlight what I lacked? To my surprise, the day was both healing and bittersweet. Melanie's large Italian family embraced me completely, heaping my plate with food, drawing me into conversations, treating me as if I'd always been part of their circle. Her father asked thoughtful questions about my job. Her mother taught me how to make proper risotto. Her brothers teased me like they teased her. This is what family should feel like, I thought as I helped wash dishes afterward. The kitchen warm and chaotic, with too many people and too much laughter. Not perfect, not without conflict. I witnessed several good-natured arguments throughout the day, but fundamentally secure. Everyone there knew they belonged, knew they were valued simply for existing, not for what they could provide. 6 months into my job, during my first performance review, Stephanie surprised me with high praise and an early promotion. "You're one of our strongest junior associates," she said. "Your attention to detail, your creativity, your ability to anticipate client needs. These are qualities we can't train. I see leadership potential in you, Ashley." As I thanked her, fighting back unexpected tears, my phone buzzed with an email notification. I checked it later in the bathroom, hands shaking when I saw the sender: Mom. The message was brief and casual, as if 6 months of silence had never happened. "Hi, sweetie. Just checking in to see how you're doing. Dad and I are thinking about visiting Chicago this summer. Maybe we could get together? Love, Mom." No mention of our last conversation. No acknowledgement of the graduation they'd missed or the money they'd demanded. No apology for the family members they'd enlisted to pressure me. Just a breezy note that completely bypassed all the pain and conflict. My initial reaction was anger so intense it made me physically shake. How dare they pretend nothing had happened? How dare they assume they could drop in and out of my life at their convenience? I drafted several responses, each more scathing than the last, but sent none of them. Instead, I brought the email to my next therapy session. "What do you want to do?" Dr. Hayes asked after I'd vented my frustration. "Part of me wants to ignore them completely," I admitted. "Another part wants to tell them exactly how hurtful their behavior has been. And a small stupid part still hopes that somehow they've changed, that they finally understand what they've done." "That's not stupid," she said gently. "It's human to hope for reconciliation, especially with parents. The question is, what would a healthy relationship with them look like for you? What would you need from them to make that possible?" That question stayed with me for days. What would I need? An apology, certainly, a real one that acknowledged specific harms, not a generic "sorry if you felt hurt." Recognition of patterns, not just isolated incidents. Commitment to change, not just temporary good behavior. And most importantly, respect for my boundaries, even when they didn't like or understand them. After careful consideration and consultation with Dr. Hayes, I composed a response. "Thank you for reaching out. I've been doing well professionally and personally, building a life here in Chicago. Before we discuss any visits, I need to address what happened between us. The pattern of me being unimportant in your lives culminated in you missing my graduation for a Super Bowl party, then asking me for $5,000 days later. When I set a boundary around money, you cut contact and enlisted family members to pressure me. For us to have any relationship moving forward, I need acknowledgement of these harms and a commitment to more respectful patterns of interaction. I'm open to family therapy if you're willing. If not, I understand. Not everything is about you, Ashley. Everyone makes mistakes, and holding grudges isn't healthy. We should just move forward and put this behind us. Family therapy seems excessive for what was just a misunderstanding. There it was, the non-apology, the minimization, the refusal to acknowledge specific harms, the suggestion that my reasonable boundaries were actually unreasonable grudges. Nothing had changed. The realization was painful but clarifying. They weren't capable of the relationship I needed. Not because they were monsters, but because they lacked the emotional tools and self-awareness necessary for genuine connection. Understanding this helped me shift from anger to a more complicated compassion. I could feel sad for them, for the limitations that prevented them from experiencing deep relationships, while still protecting myself from further harm. I didn't respond to their email. Instead, I channeled my energy into building the life I wanted. I took on challenging projects at work, eventually leading a major campaign for a national client that earned recognition across the industry. I deepened my friendships with Melanie, Jason, and new colleagues. I even began cautiously dating, learning to be vulnerable with someone who had earned my trust. Through it all, my parents remained on the periphery of my life. Not completely absent, but not truly present either. Occasional texts and emails that I answered politely but briefly. Christmas and birthday cards with generic messages. The relationship had found a new equilibrium. Surface-level pleasantries without meaningful connection. It wasn't what I'd hoped for, but it was what was possible. And I was learning that sometimes, accepting reality instead of clinging to fantasy is the most healing choice of all. 1 year after graduation, I stood in my new apartment, a larger one-bedroom in a neighborhood I loved, with big windows and a small balcony where I'd created a container garden. The space reflected who I was becoming. Comfortable with both aesthetics and practicality, willing to put down roots, able to invest in joy alongside necessity. I just made the final payment on my undergraduate loans, an achievement that felt monumental. Looking at the confirmation email, I remembered all the nights I'd worked until exhaustion, all the meals I'd skipped to save money, all the sacrifices that had led to this moment of financial freedom. The sense of accomplishment was entirely my own, not tied to anyone else's validation or approval. My relationship with my parents had settled into a careful distance. I'd established clear boundaries. I would engage in surface-level communication, holiday greetings, occasional updates on major life events, but nothing deeper. I wouldn't discuss finances under any circumstances. I wouldn't visit their home in Michigan, though I offered to meet in public places if they came to Chicago. They didn't like these boundaries, but they had come to accept them, or at least to stop actively fighting them. Our interactions were polite but shallow, like distant acquaintances rather than family. It wasn't the healing I'd once hoped for, but it was a sustainable arrangement that protected my well-being, while acknowledging the reality of who they were. They're not going to change, Dar. Hayes had told me during one of our sessions. The question is, can you accept them as they are, with all their limitations while still taking care of yourself? That had become my ongoing work, accepting the parents I had rather than longing for the parents I wished they'd been. Some days were easier than others. Birthdays and holidays still triggered sadness for what should have been. But increasingly, I found myself focusing on the family I was creating around me rather than the family I'd been born into. Melanie and Jason remained my closest friends, joined now by colleagues from work and new connections I'd made in Chicago. We celebrated each other's successes, supported each other through setbacks, showed up consistently in ways both big and small. They were teaching me what real support looked like, not transactional or conditional, but freely given from a place of genuine care. My career continued to flourish. Stephanie had become more than a boss. She was a mentor who pushed me to grow while providing the guidance I needed. Under her tutelage, I was developing confidence not just in my marketing skills but in my leadership abilities. She saw potential in me that I was only beginning to recognize in myself. You have a remarkable capacity to connect with people, she told me during a performance review. Clients trust you because you listen deeply and respond thoughtfully. That's rare in this industry, and it's going to take you far. Her words struck me deeply. The very qualities that had made me the mature one in my family, empathy, responsibility, attentiveness to others' needs were becoming strengths in my professional life rather than burdens. The traits I developed to survive a difficult childhood were, with proper boundaries, becoming assets in my adult life. Around this time, I also began a serious relationship with Michael, a software engineer I'd met through a mutual friend. He was kind, thoughtful, and most importantly consistent. When he said he would do something, he did it, a quality I'd come to value above almost all others. He listened to my family history without judgment, understanding the ways it had shaped me without reducing me to my wounds. "I see you," he told me one evening as we walked along Lake Michigan. "Not just the capable, put-together professional, but all of you, including the parts that are still healing, still figuring things out. And I think you're pretty amazing." His words touched a place in me that had always felt hidden, unseen. Being fully known and still valued was a new experience, one that sometimes frightened me with its intensity, but also offered profound healing. As the one-year anniversary of my graduation approached, I decided to do something symbolic. I framed my diploma, finally. I'd kept it in its mailing tube all this time, unable to look at it without remembering the pain of that day. But now, I wanted to reclaim it as a symbol of my achievement, rather than my disappointment. Next to it, I placed a photo, not of my parents but of me with Melanie and Jason after the ceremony, all of us in our caps and gowns, smiling despite everything. They had shown up for me when my parents couldn't or wouldn't. They had celebrated my achievement with genuine joy. They had been family in the ways that truly mattered. Looking at that newly framed display, I thought about everything I'd learned in the year since graduation. That family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up, who stays, who makes space for all of you. That setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for healthy relationships and personal growth. That forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it simply means releasing the hope for a different past, so you can create a better future. That pain can be a powerful teacher. If you're willing to sit with it, learn from it, and then let it transform rather than define you. And perhaps most importantly, that my worth was never dependent on my parents' ability to see it. It existed independently of their limitations, their choices, their capacity to love. I wasn't completely healed. There were still days when old patterns of thinking crept in, when I caught myself seeking validation through achievement, when I struggled to believe I was enough just as I was. But those days were becoming less frequent, the old wounds less raw. In their place was growing a steadier sense of self, rooted not in others' approval but in my own values and choices. I was learning to parent myself with the kindness and consistency my childhood had lacked. I was creating a life where I was never an afterthought, where my needs, my feelings, and my boundaries mattered. And that, I realized, was the true graduation, not the ceremony my parents had missed, but this ongoing process of becoming fully myself, free from the patterns that had once constrained me. So what about you? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family? Have you experienced the pain of not being prioritized by those who should care the most? Or maybe you found your chosen family, the people who show up for you consistently when your blood relatives couldn't? Share your story in the comments below. Remember, healing isn't linear, and wherever you are in your journey is valid. If my story resonated with you, please like and subscribe, not just for more content, but so we can build a community of people supporting each other through these difficult but transformative experiences. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember that you deserve to be someone's priority, not their afterthought. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and others, is to set boundaries that protect your peace and honor your worth.